Okay, we are live. Welcome to our broadcast. Here we are today, Saturday, 12th of October, and we're here to talk about the impact of the Middle East crisis. I've got with me my very good friend and brother, Mr. Chris, who is going to introduce himself to you anyway, all the way from, the mother of Africa, nation of beauty in Kenya, Nairobi. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much. And before I let you introduce yourself properly, if you're watching me right now, you know my tradition. Of course, you know what I was going to say. You need to like this page. You need to share this page. You need to tell us where you're watching from so that we'll be able, to broadcast and welcome you on board. You're welcome to TRAZ, Intelligence Security and Intelligence and Security Solution Limited, the foremost trusted security platform, where you get all your intelligence and all issues. People are joining us live. Mr. Chris, people are started to join. I can see them. I see people joining us for all the way from Lagos. I can see people joining us. Oh, we have people from Netherlands. Thank you so much. Mr. Ella Stockton is there watching us live. It's going live. So before we go into the controversial conversation that we're having today, please, Mr. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background so that our viewers back home could know who you are and who is live with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Temi. Thank you, viewers. Welcome to this live meeting. Welcome. Like Temi said, my name is Chris Otieno. I'm a Kenyan born. I've served in my government. I've served in the private sector, in NGOs, local, international, and currently serving as a global risk analyst. So I'm really glad to sit here under TRAZ and equally a regional director, East Africa and North Africa for TRAZ Intelligence and Security Solutions Limited. So I am so glad and so very ready. Download on this discussion.
Thank you so much. You've been part of the conversation. I will be having this deep conversation, and we are security analysts, so it's important because we know this particular topic is a very, very controversial topic because there are those that are on the side of Israel and those that are on the side of the Palestinians and the Iranians and the Iraqs and the Middle East who have their own personal in-depth reason, understanding from, being shaped by religion, being shaped by ethnicity, being shaped by geopolitics. But I'm happy to announce that myself and you, we are completely taken out of that. We're not interested in that. We're looking at it from an African perspective. We're looking at it from how it impacts on Africa and what Africa can get from it. The reason I'm saying this for our viewers who might not be aware or who might not have been born dead. When the Iraq war happened, a lot of African countries made a lot of money from the issue because, of course, there was challenges with oil and everything. And yet, here we are. Now, most of them are going through the economic crisis because they did not actually prepare for it. But here we are, myself and Mr. Chris, we're going to hold them accountable because we're not going to tell them what they need to be doing, how they need to be dealing with issues, what lesson they could learn from Iran, from Iraq, from Hezbollah and the others, and how we could make Africans safe. So, Mr. Chris, let's jump into it. And I've got some questions here that have been thrown in from colleagues from around the world. And in the first question, they actually say, in what ways do the current crisis or conflict in the Middle East impact on Africa, particularly in terms of security and economic stability? So how does this ongoing, crisis, between Israel and Gaza, Lebanon and the proxies of Yemen, how is it affecting Africa from an economic and security perspective?
Well, tell me, first of all, let me thank you for passing that disclaimer about us trying our best not to be neither here nor here, because this one is a divisive issue. But like you just well said, we're going to be factual, and we do not intend by whatsoever means to hurt anybody by what we are saying. We're just analyzing things as they come and as they are. So thank you for your first question. Allow me to first start by saying that there will be immense impact in terms of economy. there'll be, first of all, human suffering. And this human suffering comes from many directions. There'll be securitization of the various zones. There'll be human suffering in terms of displacement populations. And all these populations, they move from one place to the other. They have a lot of effect on what they do. There's going to be loss of lives. There's going to be increased fragility. There's going to be food insecurity and higher prices and economic instability. But the Israel and Iran war conflict will disrupt global oil and gas supplies. And this one will definitely lead to very high prices and economic instability. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hamas, what are we saying? Strait of Hamas is quite a critical checkpoint for global economy. It is here through which a fifth of the world's oil flows, and disrupting this flow and energy from this energy-rich region basically means something else to the entire globe. Qatar, one of the world's biggest producers of natural gas, also depends on these Straits of Hamas to transport its production or products from their country to the global market, right? So we are saying here that the global oil prices have already soared 9% since the first Iranian. So if Israel were to retaliate on the latest attack, then we are seeing a double-digit figure in terms of increase in oil and gas prices, right? And this will be an upend international energy supply, and this will send shockwaves throughout the global economy, right? There'll be major disruption of regional oil and gas exports, and is likely to have a material impact on the global economy. What else, if we look at this regionally, whereas the West has somewhat insulated itself from the immediate impact due to increased domestic energy production, China's economy is particularly vulnerable to rising oil prices because they depend on oil a lot. What does that mean? Yeah. So there are also concerns that Iran could target oil installations in neighboring countries, and if they were attacked by Israel, and they have gone deliberately through the international diplomacy, shuttle diplomacy, to warn the Gulf Cooperation countries. If you let Israel use your airspace, this means that we shall retaliate by attacking and burning your oil wells. What does that mean to the global economy? We are an economy that is quite dependent on oil and gas. If there is a short supply in that, then the markets become totally disrupted, and that means different things. People have to go to other sources to supplement or sustain the economy, and that alone will mean that, right? That alone will mean that even the African markets, while we are exploring oil, we're exploring the extraction of gas, for example, in Namibia, in my country, Kenya, in neighboring Uganda, and other countries, our focus and attention will turn there. And as we go into our discussion, we'll see that these natural resources become a source of conflict, and that could mean destabilization of probably the entire Africa or regions of Africa, right? So Iranian retaliation against the possible Israeli attack that affect global energy prices or trade would be viewed as an act of aggression and lead to pressure on Iran. Iran, of course, has own problems, and that means something totally different, Teddy. This will be something impacting continent's logistical chain. Africa is the epicenter of feeling the presence of global logistics chain and requiring a shift in alliances. If that happens, of course, there'll be a shift in alliances. And we shall discuss as we go on how each and every country in Africa is alienated or has a diplomatic ties with the West Asian countries. And that is really something that we shall look at greatly and see how this can really go out and affect all of us.
In fact, this conversation is blowing the internet as we speak. Mr. Roland has to say, not forgetting that Iran economic is a mess already place. If you're watching me right now, all I need from you to do, you need to do three things, just three things to make me happy. You need to like this page. You need to share this page. And you need to tell your friends that we are live. And I could see that we have viewers right now to speak from Europe. Of course, we have viewers all the way in Lagos. So you need to tell us where you're watching us from, so people could know that you're watching. We have people are watching from 3 continents as we speak. They're watching us live on Facebook, live on LinkedIn, and live on YouTube. And those are your brothers also in Kenya, so they need to let us know so that you could speak to them in the native language also. So as we go ahead, because you've already hit on some very, very major issues here. And I was going to say earlier that part of the challenges we know is that if the Prime Minister of Britain, the Prime Minister of Israel has made it clear that they're going to make it very powerful. They're not going to wait. They're going to really hit Iran where it hurts, And Iran has sent the message, like you rightly said, that you know what, do your best, but we will hit even harder. We will hit harder, and any state that allows you, including America, that allows you to come into our airspace to hit us, we will go after American interests, and we will go after those Gulf countries, which means regional chaos. But then the Prime Minister of Israel had two placards. Is one Prime Minister from among many leaders that tried to do a lot of PowerPoint. I don't know if he went to school in the days of PowerPoint, but he did it. But he's very good in using those illustrations. And he had the axis of evil in one hand and, the good. And he said, with the Abrahamic covenant that they were entering into, he said there will be gas going through, there will be communication that will help. We have Mali's watching us all the way from Kenya. Thank you so much. She's sending you a message. So do you want to say something in Kenya so they will know that we're international on this platform?
Welcome, fellow Kenyans.
Okay. Oh, that's English. That's good. Thank you. So we know that we have a lot of challenges ahead. So I want to say, how have African nations been affected by the displacement and refugee crisis, resulting from the Middle East conflict? Taking into consideration the article that we, yourself was part of the people that sanctioned that article, when we were talking about the double, what was the word I want to use? I want to be very, very careful. The two-edged sword approach taken by African countries, where a lot of Africans in the diaspora, especially those ones in Lebanon, were saying that the government was saying one thing with one mouth and doing something else with another mouth. Both in Kenya, both in Nigeria, Nigerians that were in Lebanon and Kenyans that are there are saying that the government is telling them to do one thing, but they're actually doing something else. So what is your view about the impact that this is going to have, especially from a refugee perspective on Africa?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question, Temi. And I want to be very candid about this refugee aspect of this armed conflict. Now, we know that refugee crisis across the globe has had a transformative impact on every aspect of, for example, politics, or for example, economies, societies, and states that have experienced these massive forced population movements have had quite a lot to do in terms of what we just mentioned. Now, we also know that time immemorial, there's been a very large-scale forced population movement in the West Asia or Middle East countries, right? And they've experienced a dramatic flood of refugees and forced migration. Now, neighboring countries of the Middle East, we are talking about here, Egypt, South Sudan, Eritrea, and Somalia. What are we saying? We are saying here that these neighboring states have faced severe challenges absorbing these millions of refugees, while North Africa states and Turkey have emerged as key hubs for refugee flow into Europe. So what are we saying? They say that they will come there, they will harbor there for some time, and as they harbor there, a lot of resources by that government, where they're harboring, will need to be allocated to sustain them for the short period that they will be there. Now, refugee protection also, by no means, particularly the Middle East and North Africa, which we call MENA region, all right, has a lot of forced persons that come there. Let's go back into history. Look at Lebanese War of 1975-1991. This one led the dispatch of a quarter of Lebanese population. Where did they go to? Part of them came into Africa. The 1990 Iraq invasion of Kuwait and then the Desert Storm, that saw mass exodus of Arab, overwhelming Palestinians, all right, and non-Arab expatriate workers from Kuwait. That one also. So part of those guys coming to Africa. The brutal sanctions that was imposed on in this country of Iran. What does that mean to the global African continent? Part of those people came into Africa. What did we end up doing? What ended up happening in Africa? The population movement put enormous strain on the infrastructure that was available there. If it's a refugee camp, of course, every government has a budget to that. We also see international players coming in there, all right, to establish themselves, right? So we're saying basically with that movement, population displacement, we are going to see an introduction of semi-permanent presence of international organizations into everyday governance of the non-citizen population. That means something else. When the situation returns to normalcy, then we can see a lot of other things that come with that. For example, crime could come with that, radicalization could come with that, and many other aspects, right? So these regional dynamics then go away, they go way, way far in influencing the way, for example, so-called Arab Spring that affected Syria. They came from these kind of items. They came from these kind of scenarios, right? So this one goes way ahead in challenging the core elements of state sovereignty and demands millions and millions of non-nationals to present a particular country, and that has a way myriad effects on how that country is governed, and even the way those refugee populations are governed. Like we say, that could be a driver to an Arab Spring, just like it happened in Syria many years ago. So this one has very many ripple effects in terms of the long-term effects of what could come from this refugee migration or population displacement.
You are speaking like a political philosopher, because your words have just been echoed, by Mr. Roland in Netherlands, and we also have one of our regional directors also joining us all the way from Chicago. So when I said we have 3 continents coming together, we have people from Kenya, which is in Africa, we have Chicago, which is in the United States, we have Europe. So everybody is joining and giving their views on this. And I don't want you to stop. I want you to like this page. I want you to share this page. I want you to tell your friends that we're live here on LinkedIn, live on Facebook, and live on YouTube, talking about the impact of this crisis on Africa. And I want you to share this page with your friends and colleagues at home so they could know that we're here looking at it from an African perspective. We're Africans. We're only interested in the perspective as it affects Africa and how our leaders could learn from it. So my third question, sir, is very simple. What lesson can African leaders learn from the geopolitical dynamics of the Middle East in handling internal regional conflicts?
There are many ways that we in the African continent, right together with our leadership, can learn from what is happening in the West Asia conflicts. First and foremost, is global to mention that we must learn how to mitigate the impact of foreign interference, and that must be gotten so very clearly by every leader in any country in the 54 countries of Africa. Right now, we know that the interference of foreign countries has brought what we call chronic instability and the practice of violence. And this characterizes everyday life and to a great extent influenced by external interests as at play within the country's political arena. So we must be cognizant of that. That should we be reluctant, should we lax and fall frail into foreign interference, then chronic instability and violence will erupt time and again. Look at what is happening in the River Niger. In the Niger Delta. We shall discuss when it comes to African resources. Then we have unresolved grievances that are bred in the grounds from subsequent crises. We have lots of items in Africa that have gone unresolved. All right, and when these foreign countries take note of them, all right, they will fuel them, and that will result to something different. Right? They will result to things that take root in pre-existing divisions within the target country. So within that very country, we will see that they could exploit that to do things that really will destabilize a particular nation in Africa that does not have the right social defenses to defend itself against foreign interferences. So at the basic core of our response, we are saying that to mitigate this risk of foreign interference, every African nation must stand strongly to mitigate the impact of these foreign interferences, noting very well that we have a lot of things down in us, down in our communities, down in our social structures that are still unresolved, that we will wait for a single item to rekindle them. And once rekindled, then we will see instability, we will see eruption of violence, and many other things that come together as party to these interferences.
Yeah, one of our brothers also, I agree with your perspective here. He's talking about who are the beneficiaries and is the UN Security Council toothless or political? That's another topic for another day. That is serious conversation there for my brother over there. Thank you so much for that contribution, sir. The Middle East has seen external powers, like you rightly said, heavily involved in conflict. How should African leaders manage foreign interference in their own regional affairs? We've seen it in the Congo issue. We've seen it, in the what do you call Niger issue. With the French interference in Mali. It is a serious. What is your view, sir? And what can we learn from this now in moving forward, sir?
One thing that we must learn from this, my CEO, is that the number of internationalized interstate conflict will gradually increase unless we establish the right response and the right buffers that stop them from materializing in the respective countries. Right? Now, with rising geopolitical tensions, these trends show no sign of abating. They're going to go up in number, up in multitude, even severity, they still go up. Now, external actors often prolong and intensify such conflicts as they seek to further their interests, including by providing financial support to violent groups, sowing discord, and spreading disinformation. We must be cognizant of this. We must be cognizant and really work it. So the best thing to do would be, right, correcting the narrative of the pact of the future and prevention of our sovereignty by enhancing exactly what we want to do. The Africa trading relationship with the West and EU, we must look at that. We, led by leaders, must look at the right items to address so that our relationship with the Western countries become an item of concern. And we must really go out and address that and really find out exactly what do we do to ensure that we move on. Next, there must be a cushioning against us exposing ourselves to becoming puppets of these foreign governments and things like that. This will help us stabilizing our own countries, and this will help us in exactly ensuring that our policies take the front bench, not the back bench. Because once we let them take the back bench, something different happens, my CEO. Something totally different happens. That takes these tensions pretty high.
I have to salute the leadership of African Security Forum. I can't stop but, salute them. I could see Barrister Olivia, watching all the way on LinkedIn, and that is live. My brother from people watching on Facebook intensively, and not to talk of YouTube. So I celebrate them. But what they could do for me is also like this page, share this page, tell friends, and let us know where you're watching from. Just like our brother, that was our director watching from Netherlands, and the one watching from Chicago. I love them both. Love them. Let's take this to the next level. Let's move to gear 2 on this matter, because given the Middle East dependency on oil, what parallels could be drawn with African resource management? And how can Africa avoid similar resource-driven conflict?
Thank you, Mr. Temi. One thing that we must recognize as Africans, Africa is rich in natural resources. And this ranges from arable land, goes to water, goes to oil, goes to natural gas, minerals, forests and wildlife, coal and charcoal, gold, silver, lead, iron ore, cobalt, mention that. We have all this in Africa. Now, the combination of rising development, wildlife crime, weak regulatory framework has put severe strain on African natural resources, threatening regional biodiversity and livelihoods of local communities and long-term development. Africa, therefore, needs policy strategies for the effective management of all these natural resources within the context of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. We need to adopt policies that better harness the potential of natural resources as an opportunity for development, to foster policies and institutionalization of innovative ways to manage resources, wealth, and equitable boost in human capital. Natural resources, like we say, right, are a wealth that has potential to limit many out of poverty, sustain economic growth, and foster political stability. It does not guarantee this benefit, but it is one of the ways out. Therefore, for example, African diamonds, cobalt, and other natural resources They must help us in facilitating the production of technology and other modern conveniences. When we use that from that particular manner, then we will say them, therefore, we could be free from colonial powers. Look at what is happening in Burkina Faso. One of the things that they've done is to make sure that the processing of gold is done within the African continent. Not that we take our raw materials to the Western countries and have them processed and then find their way back into the African market for selling finished product. No, we are saying that is the wrong approach. We must have our own resources protected right from here, have policy frameworks that govern how we utilize our resources, and thereafter use that to sustain our development and even push us more and more into innovating modern technology, and Africa taking a center stage in innovative technologies.
No, you again, as usual, you're hitting it and hitting it on the nail. And we have a sister watching all the way and following us from right on YouTube, all the way from Kenya. So beautiful, beautiful. Is there any lessons that we could learn from the security situation, the security innovation that we're seeing, the use of drones, to actually hit a target rather than waiting on America to sell us, planes worth millions? I can say it. I'm in Europe. They're selling us, they will have to go through Congress before we could even get one plane sold to us. Then we need to train people on it. Meanwhile, drones, we could put drones together or get drones cheaper, and yet make a lot of impact. We've seen it in Ukraine. We've seen it now in the way the Israelites have been using it and Israel have been using it. What do you have to say to that?
I want to say one thing. War has a great effect on a nation's economy. For you to sustain war, we know it has three things: man, material, and money. If any country were to sustain war for a very long time, then those three items must be in one place at the same time. Now, because we are having a number of conflicts in the continent of Africa, almost 49 conflicts at current time, we are therefore saying, with these conflicts going on, and with our inability to raise enough finances to be able to sustain this war, that we must be able to explore innovative ways of resolving armed conflicts in Africa. And one of these is what you just mentioned, right? We must go right ahead and innovate ways that are much affordable in Africa. Drone is a technology. Look at how Iran attacked Israel in the first attack. What did they use? Thousands, drones. Hundreds of drones. Why? Because they know very well that when it comes to air superiority, Israel is a leading hub of technology, and there is no way they can match Israel in terms of air defenses. So what did they do? What was to send to Israel as many cheap drones as is possible, knowing very well that Israel would retaliate with a lot of expensive weaponry to shoot them down. Right? What does that mean? It means basically that Iran had a strategy to drain Israel resources so that they might not be capable of prolonging their presence in this particular war, and that would mean something so different. So what are we saying in Africa? We need to use our natural resources to better our technology and to use the technology to be able to resolve the conflicts that are here in the continent of Africa. And that is just one of the better ways that we can have a lot of presence, a lot of boots on the ground, and use of technology to make sure that conflicts in Africa are drawn to as low as is reasonably possible. And that promotes African stability, and that makes Africa a better place in terms of peace, stability, and economies of scale in what we are doing.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving in neatly into the next area that I want to move, moving to gear 3 of this conversation. How should African leaders address the growing influence of extremist groups which have spread from the Middle East into Africa?
Thank you for that question, Temi. Africa, South Africa and Nigeria should take lead in this aspect. Now, we know very well that preventing violent extremism requires a number of interventions. And one of the interventions is promoting inclusive development. Next is tolerance. And the next is a respect for diversity. Now, how do we promote inclusive development? Like you have just mentioned a few minutes ago, Africa has myriad of resources. These resources could be used to finance, all right, African countries, create wealth in African countries, And that will go a very long way in preventing violent extremism. Now, why is Middle East really being thrown into these fights? And we're seeing a lot of these fighters being very youthful, because unemployment rate in Middle East is quite high. And this youthful population have that particular time, right, to take arms and go and fuel this kind of conflicts. Next that we need to do in Africa is to promote a rule of law and human rights based on the approach, right, of PVE. We need to enhance the fight against corruption, because even corruption enhances the presence of these violent extremists. We need to enhance participatory decision making and increasing civic space at national and at local levels, and ensure this message is being taken down to the grassroots. We need also to provide effective socioeconomic alternatives to violence for groups that are at risk. And we just mentioned the youthful population, and we saw how that played in the protests in Kenya, in Uganda, in Nigeria, and other countries that experience these kinds of protests. So if we create effective socioeconomic alternatives for this youthful population, then we could be able to reduce that, right? And we're also saying, as these persons migrate from Middle East into Africa, they find time to radicalize our youths, and those youths can take arms and be able to fuel the violence out of that radicalization. Next thing that we need to do is to strengthen the capacity of local governments for service delivery and security. We find that most of the times, these terrorists will have proliferation in ungovernable spaces. If we make our spaces in Africa governable, then we'll go a very long way into thwarting possible proliferation or having dead cells in our countries that could be activated and having them promote violence in Africa. We need also to support credible internal intermediaries to promote dialogue with allied groups and reintegration of former extremists. So we are talking at policy level. We are talking at government approach to reduction of radicalization. We are talking at government and bloc approach. For example, ECOWAS approaching how they want to address the Sahel region. What will they do in the Sahel region to ensure that radicalization has been brought to as low as is reasonably possible? So we have a lot of things that we can do. Gender equality is something else. Engaging the youth in building social cohesion is something else. Working with faith-based organizations and religious leaders to counter the abuse of religion by violent extremists is something else. And finally, we can work with the media to promote human rights and tolerance. If we do this holistically, then we are basically saying that we will be placing ourselves on the path to reducing violent extremists and such influences from what is coming into Africa in terms of displaced populations, and radicalizing our population that could promote the same level of violence that we are seeing in the West Asian nations.
Thank you so much. And a lot of our viewers, people watching us all the way on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and YouTube, please let us know where you're watching us from, so we can acknowledge and appreciate you for joining us this afternoon. A lot of our listeners have been, people watching us have been asking questions about African Union. What role do you think African regional organizations such as the African Union should play in addressing similar crises within the continent? Because we've had crises, and I know you've been on TV talking on most of them. So what role do they play, so that we're not like the talking shop that has been the phrase used for the United Nations Security Council? How do we ensure that we are more effective in, at least our regional bodies are more effective than the United Nations, which seems to be a sitting duck currently?
Thanks very much for that question. The more I think of it, the more I want to say that this is an opportunity. Organization of African Union is an opportunity for Africa to ensure that its critical items affecting the livelihoods of fellow Africans are addressed in that particular forum, because it is there that we have all the heads of state meeting and discussing pertinent issues that affect Africa. But now the problem is when we sit in African Organization Union, we have a lot of interference from Western nations. Sometimes we find some of our leaders promoting Western ideas or backing up or going towards the direction of what the Western countries want. How can we get ourselves off this kind of chains? And we have said in this sitting, in this discussion, that Africa has a wealth of experience. It's a wealth of resources. If we use our resources to harness our financial capability, if we use our resources to better each and every African countries under the auspice of Organization of African Union, then we are basically saying that then we can promote ourselves and, for example, be able to argue loans given to African nations at the International Monetary Fund, at the World Bank, and things like that. Last time, the president of my nation, Honorable William Ruto, told Macron in his face that African nations are receiving loans and grants from IMF and the World Bank at much different rates than compared to those nations. For the very reason that they have more say in those institutions than ourselves. So how then can we act as a bloc? If we use these platforms like the African Union and our trading bloc, ECOWAS, SADC, all these ones, if they come together and be able to promote equivocally the African interest, for example, even in the United Nations, we're almost having a permanent seat in the United Nations, very good for Africa. If we use this kind of platforms to promote Africa as a nation, Africa as a globe, Africa as unity, then I'll tell you, for no apparent reason, for every reason possible, then Africa will have a very good standing in the global arena.
Thank you so much. And we have people watching us all the way in Liberia. We have people watching us in Ibadan. Ibadan is a city, one of the West African cities. And it's interesting. We have Mr. Frederick watching us all the way in Kenya. We have people watching us all the way in Chicago. We have people watching us in Netherlands. Ibadan is, will you believe it, that Ibadan there were television station in Ibadan before France. That's how advanced Africa was. Africa had a television station even before Europe. And that's the reason why, we need to talk to African leaders and tell them that, do something, work for your people, get the resources now when this crisis is brewing, because we know the money is coming in dollars, and we don't want you to say you are saving money for your cronies to siphon, which is what is happening with the vice president in Kenya, who is now facing a lot of political crisis. Please go and read Mr. Chris' article on that on LinkedIn if you want to know what I'm talking about. If you're watching us from Ibadan, tell us where you're watching us from before we start mentioning your name one after the other. So let's move to the so we start mentioning names of people watching us. If they don't start telling us where they're watching us from. Now, we talked about terrorists and the fact that a lot of the terrorists from even Middle East, they moved into Africa, helping in Libya, getting involved in Libya, getting involved in Mali, getting involved in Kenya, in Somalia, which affected Kenya. So there is, if these guys, if Syria is out of the way, and if Syria is too hot for them, and Israel is bombing Lebanon, they will look for somewhere to hide. The Sahel is somewhere, the Somalia is somewhere, ungoverned spaces, like you mentioned. Looking at technology and what we have learned from Israel in the last few days on how they handled Hezbollah, in 1 week or 2 weeks, they were able to discommunicate, to actually eradicate their communication system in such a way to go after their leaders. Why do you think it's so difficult for our leaders not to see similarities in this and actually work in using some of the technology here to help themselves, with the help of the diasporans?
I think of very many reasons, Mr. Temi. So many reasons. Why are we not harnessing our capability as Africans? Why are we not harnessing this kind of? Why are we not coping? Why are we not borrowing? Right? I think the reason here is the political will. There is a clear lack of political will in terms of how we want to fight off these conflicts that face very many regions. I think there's a lack of a structured way to approach. I think there's just lack of allowing us to go into the technology warfare. There's that lack of that will, that we want to take a deliberate step toward reducing the loss of human life and fronting technologies as our number one item of defense. That is lack. If at all we can harness that, then I tell you, Africa can be a big forefront where technology development is unspelled. We cannot say what is the limit, because there's so much that we can explore. Look at how spectacular Israel came out in wiping out communication system of this extremist Hezbollah extremist group. That was a spectacular approach. Really, we can do that. We know very well. Communication is key. In security and safety, it's very key. And we know those who want to harm us, those who want to hurt us, those who want to disrupt our way of living, of course, communicate on a daily basis. What if we went after them from a technological perspective? The only way we can do that is if we ourselves develop our own capabilities technologically to fight off this kind of attacks and reduce that kind of a human intervention. So my thinking and my insistence is that all African leaders should sit down and watch what is happening and be able to borrow the extraordinaries, the advancements that we are seeing in this kind of conflicts, but at the same time, not want to borrow the negatives and the abnormalities that we are seeing in this kind of, for example, loss of lives and displacement of populations. But the technology, how they're handling these groups, how they are breaking them down one day after the other. This can be a lesson for us to use in fighting off the NIACs that are happening here in Africa, and to be able to dismantle these groups and ensure that no life in the African continent is lost through violent extremism.
Thank you so much. And we're not going to hold our lips back in, speaking truth to power. We know what happened in Rwanda, and we don't pray that to happen again in any part of Africa. And many people have drawn correlations between, the use of proxy by Iran, in fighting Israel, to things that have happened in Africa in the past. And I wanted to ask you, since we're looking at it from an African perspective, what can African leaders learn from the way Iran uses non-state actors like Hezbollah to project power, particularly in fragile states and regions with weak governance? And I know that Kenya and some countries in the East Africa bit are a bit concerned about the way they believe that Rwanda is interfering in Congo. And I know those are areas that you are well familiar with. I'm not saying you should go in depth into it, but is there lessons that we could learn from how to be able to checkmate and bring to other African leaders who are using proxies within Africa to destabilize Africa?
Thank you. Let's first of all look at how Iran is operating. Let's look at the structure, the demographics of Iran. We know that majority of Iranians are Shia Muslims, and the other Gulf cooperation countries around Iran, neighboring Iran, are Sunni Muslims. Now, yes, one thing that Iran is exploiting, they are using very high military intelligence to really know what is happening in each of the neighboring countries. And in any space where there's a lack of governance, we find Iran using proxies to destabilize or exert its power and influence in West Asia. Right? Let's go to Lebanon. In Lebanon, we find that that Hezbollah, over a very long time, has depended on Iran for the supply of its weaponry, the training of its personnel, and financial backup. To an extent that Hezbollah has created itself a governance council, a governing council, and turned itself from that movement into a formidable political force. And if years went by, I am so sure we'll see Hezbollah ruling Beirut, ruling Lebanon. Come to Yemen, the Houthis. What do? Right? They are purely there to support or ensure that what the Iranian government wants, it is what goes through. They will block Western transportation or use of Suez in transporting goods to the other markets. Go to other nations, for example, in Israel themselves. They are funding Hamas in Gaza. And many of these that we have seen. Basically, what we are saying, for this not to happen in Africa, every African country must ensure that they attain stability, and at the same time, they have a very strong governance system that does not allow any interference from whatsoever angle. Right? Because once we allow that, then other countries can find a way to use their proxies. You have mentioned a very good case, Rwanda in DRC. I don't want to break that down, but we know that the president of Rwanda in DRC has elicited a lot of complaints, even from international bodies, is saying that we are not quite clear on exactly what is the mandate of Rwandese army in Congo, because we are seeing something different. All right. And that alone does not promote stability. That alone does not really make an African continent have that very good reflection that in terms of conflict, Africa is recording the least number of non-state actors in conflict or state actors in conflict. So basically, tell me, fact for this matter is we must work very hard in all African countries to attain governance stability and to attain political stability and have that political will to unify our countries and walk very, very far away, separate ourselves from any possible conflict that could promote what I've mentioned, and that could attract non-state actors promoted by other countries to come and destabilize African continent as a whole. Tell me, I've lost you. Are you there? As Temi tries to sort his audio and his video, let me discuss one of the menacing issues in Africa. Sorry, Temi, I was trying to discuss menacing issue in Africa, as you said yourself.
Yes, the system just went plain as usual. But thank you so much. And I got your last message there. I wanted to ask, because we're getting to the last more or less 2 minutes of this program. If there is any advice that you have for the African leaders, what would be your advice?
My advice, and thank you, Temi, for giving that opportunity to advise our African leaders. And I hope they watch this and I hope they received it and I hope they make something out of it. One, which is fact, Temi, we know that African countries today face greater challenges to peace, stability than we have done ever before. Now, the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, including the Sahel, including, for example, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Liberia, DRC, right? These countries and many other countries that I've not mentioned have a volatile mix of insecurity, of instability, of corrupt political institutions, and poverty. Now, compare this. That is the state of our problems. And on the contrary, we have the most valuable resources, vastness in terms of resources here in the continent. If we, for example, to harness renewable energy, Africa alone has 60% capability of injecting renewable energy in the global grid. Look at what that is to Africa, right? But then, nevertheless, alarmingly, most of the countries lack the political will to maintain previous agreements, and therefore they fall prey into continuous armed conflicts, right? Our leaders should also know that our conflicts have patterns. Number one pattern is the demand of ethnic and cultural autonomy. How do we address that? There also the competing demands for land, money, and power. Natural resources are there. How do we manage our natural resources? And you'd ask that question, and I was very happy to have had that. Next is conflicts taking place with rival ethnic groups. So how do we therefore sit down and address these problems that we have that are ethnically based? All right. There must therefore be strategies by African countries in conflict resolution. We must look at mediation, involve UN, and when UN comes to us, they must be non-partisan. Sometimes we've seen UN being accused of being partisan in certain conflicts. We must talk of adjudication. Our leaders must be at the forefront of leading adjudication in African conflicts. We must look at peace and reconciliation in African countries. My country has a whole commission and institution set up for peace and reconciliation because of what we went through in our 2007 elections. We must also speak of arbitration. And here we are saying it's not only African countries that must be subjected to the International Justice Committee. No. That we must find ways to separate ourselves from that, because we need to establish within ourselves very powerful and strong frameworks of institutional governance that separates us from these kinds of conflicts. And lastly, African leaders must open themselves to negotiation. Look at what is happening in South Sudan. This is a conflict between two leaders. Yeah, and they are going out to accuse one nation in the Middle Eastern, in the Midwest, in West Asia, that is supplying one of them with arms and flaying the conflict that is there. So we are saying that Africa as a whole, our leaders must firmly place themselves in conflict resolution in diversification in terms of revenue streaming, and ensuring that we are harnessing what we have naturally to better Africa as a whole and be able to drive our agenda in the global arena and make us better, because Africa is the future of the globe, and we must lay the foundations to ensure that we walk into that future with our heads high as African United Front.
There's no better place than to leave it here. But before we go, I think it's important to highlight that we are all part of one big family called the TRAZ Intelligence Security Solution Limited. We have regional directors, many of them you've seen on the platform in Netherlands, in South Africa, in Chicago. You could check out our website, check out our email address that is strolling down at the bottom of the page. We have a training coming up on the 26th of October, and that training is to train people to become confidential virtual security secretaries or PA. There's a lot of space for African youth who are very resilient, who are intelligent. And if you're watching us right now and you feel, okay, I've not been able to secure a job, you could actually work and earn dollars, earn pounds, earn yen from your bedroom in Kenya, or your sitting room in Morocco, or even your backyard in Nigeria. All you need to do is join this one-day training. You're going to see it on our Facebook page, LinkedIn page, and YouTube page. You could join us, and in fact, you could be part of the revolution, which is we're training people to become secured, professional, confidential secretaries or PA. Somebody that your employer will be happy to take you on board, because they know that you have been trained properly, in how to handle, information, how to do things properly. So that is very, 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 very important. So please register for the training. You'll see it on our LinkedIn page, Facebook page. We also have the second. I'm pleased to announce that we are going to be having our second counter-terrorism diploma certificate training in the month of November. The information is going to come out there. Please register for it. Please register for it. We have a document that is due to come out very, very hot, very, very hot. And my directors, have been working on it to make it effective, make it fit for purpose. So you're going to be hearing from us soon. And we are also working on putting a program together in December on women's security. You're hearing it live first on this platform. We're going to be, because we know that a lot of our women need to be given the appropriate training and to be able to start talking about issues that many people don't want to talk about. We are different. We are trans. The trans family, we believe that there is nowhere we can't go into. And we are going to be talking about women's security. So if you are interested in that, the poster is going to be out. You could register with us. I don't know how many days training is going to be, but definitely it's going to be in December, and you could join us and, of course, enjoy from it and transpose it out, out there to ensure safety and security of our women. At this point, we only have 1 or 2 minutes to go, and I don't know. My brother in Kenya has a lot of projects that he's doing in Kenya and things that he's doing. He might want to share with you 1 or 2 things that he's doing, so that you could join him on his Facebook page, LinkedIn page. He'll be writing articles for us. His first article is just fantastic. I know one will be coming out next week. I'm not putting him under any pressure, but another one is coming. And again, watch the space. We might be doing something this week, maybe by Wednesday evening. We're still working on it. If it work well, by tomorrow you will know about it. We might be doing something, maybe on this same topic of Middle East. We might be looking at it from a different perspective. So at this point, I think, as our people say in Africa, it is time now to to raise the piper, time now to put our legs up and start drinking palm wine. So until we meet again, Saturday, 3 p.m. every week, join us for interesting, explosive security intervention and conversation. We will be posting live on Monday who will be our next speaker next week. We never know who will be, but we'll not let it out of the basket yet. But the topic, of course, you will get to know. So until then, it is bye for me from Kent in the United Kingdom and from my brother.
Kenya.
So wherever you're watching from, whether you're watching in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, I say au revoir. Any nice time. How they speak am in pidgin. Make na do well, enjoy na Saturday. Yeah, God bless you. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome again and again and again. Looking forward to hosting you again. Thank you.
Excellent.